Hi everyone, we're doing the Rust Cloud Function Challenge. This was inspired by a tweet from Bryson Tyrrell. He was talking about setting up a Rust server in a Cloud Function environment. And I figured, you know what, this would be a great challenge to do. Oftentimes, senior software engineers above are asked to do small to medium-sized lifts with languages that they know absolutely nothing about, frameworks that they know nothing about. Their goal is to use their experience to get in, understand more or less what's going on, deliver something real, and have it be essentially production grade in languages and frameworks that they are not familiar with. I think that's a common misunderstanding people have, is that people specialize in a certain framework or specialize in a certain thing. That's true usually in the beginning of people's careers, not so much as they're getting towards like the upper end of their careers. So this is a really good type of challenge to do, because this challenge requires that you have never touched Rust before. And you can do this with any language like Golang, Elixir, Rust. There's dozens of them. You know, just pick one that's popular that you've never touched before and try to do something this simple with it. So basically, what the challenge is you go ahead and it requires you've never used Rust before. You can use any functions as a service and you set up a server that responds with an HTTP 200 response, which is the OK response. And the body should just be the text OK, so very basic response. And it must be completed in 1 hour. So we've gotten started here at around 1:59. And here I am just installing Rust. I don't have Rust on my system. I'm trying to figure out how to install it. And so far, I've tried, or I'm in the middle of trying installing it with brew. And as it's installing with brew, I am just looking up other installation methods in it. And I found the Rustlang website. I was able to find it through the GitHub repo. And what we're doing is we're just kind of going through and figuring out what the situation is. At this point, I've noticed they have an install script. I'm trying to figure out if they have a supported brew installation method, because literally all I did was type in brew install Rust. And it started installing something, and I figured I'd let that do its thing in the background while I try to find another method. Because when brew works well and works as expected, it's a really fast way to get set up. But sometimes it doesn't work quite as expected, or there's another step. And if that's the case, I just uninstall the package and go install with whatever installation instructions it has. So right now we're just checking to make sure that that the Rust formula, homebrew formula, actually installs the Rust language, and it appears to. I don't spend too much time on this stuff, right? So I look at it, I check to make sure it looks like it's installing basically what's going on. And then when it's done, I'll just try typing I'll try typing in Rust, for example. And if that doesn't show up, then we'll try rustup, because I saw an example of that being, one of the tools they use. I found out later that it's basically similar to N from JavaScript, for example, or FVM from Flutter, which manages versions. So I tried installing rustup as well, and that didn't work as expected. So in a second here, I think I'm going to go ahead and use the actual install script. And it's telling me, listen, you've got stuff on your path already. You've got some Rust binaries on your path. Do you want to go ahead? And I said, you know what? Let's brew uninstall rustup, and brew uninstall Rust, because neither of those things work as expected. And we're just going to use the install script. So we're waiting for that to finish up here, right? Okay, so now that's installed, and we're going to try using so that's installed, so now we're going to install it to our path. So we're opening zsharc. We're going to go ahead and add the cargo binary folder, which is my home folder, to our path. Add that. We launch our shell, so it's on there, and sure enough, we've got rustup. Great. So I'm pretty sure we're in the game at this point. Again, remember, I've never used Rust for trying this out. We're doing this all in real time. So we've checked the Rust version, and we're getting an actual response back. So I know that we have at least rustup is set up, and rustc. I'm not entirely familiar with what it is. I imagine it's probably the compiler. Ready to go. So we're going to try and find a very basic. Trying to do a very basic app. Command line app is fine. And I'm seeing reference to this command cargo new, and I'm assuming that cargo is the package manager. I don't know this for sure, but that's my understanding, because usually package managers are responsible for creating packages. So I'm fiddling around with what I want to do here, which do I want to create a directory and then create the package, or what? And I end up going back and just creating the package from scratch. All right, so now we're doing cargo new Rust FaaS challenge. And I appear to be trying to figure out if I want to use a different name, but we'll use Rust FaaS. Okay, so now we're going to open that up in VSCode. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to publish this to GitHub. And I always publish as a private first, because then I can go in later and change it to public. But that makes sure that I don't lose anything. So now we've got our main.rs. This will look familiar to people who use Dart. It's a nice pattern. It's a pattern that we use on Dart, pattern that's being used on Rust, and it works nicely. You have like a main.dart file, in this case main.rs, and then now you have a function for main, and that's the entry point for the app. So what I've done here is I've figured out how to run it by doing cargo run. And I see that it works. And now what we're doing is we're creating a task file. You could also use makefile, but I've been using task recently, and it works nicely. And the reason I'm using this is because I'm going to forget these commands. It's just a way for me to remember, so I don't have to remember. I just record them in the task file. For any language that I'm using, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that it works. Task run, hello world, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. So I see that it's created that cargo.lock file, and I just wanted to make sure it wasn't supposed to be in gitignore. It's not. Apparently, we're checking that in the repo. Pubspec.lock, cargo.lock. I can't remember package in Node.js package lock.json, I think it's called. I'm assuming they're all pretty similar. So now what I'm looking for is just a basic HTTP server. And I'm starting to kind of get familiar with the way the language is laid out. Again, I've never looked at I've never looked at Rust code really in my life. And I know that it's a low-level language, but I know that it also has some very modern features that make it easier to deal with than your typical low-level language like C, for example. But I still haven't spent much time with it. And I should be clear, I'm a general programming language kind of person, so I don't have a whole lot of experience with languages like C. I'm a little familiar with a lot of the primitive types, different types of integers and floats and whatnot. But actually, I'm familiar with that from when I was like a kid, like 12 years old, trying to figure this stuff out. But I've never spent much time, my professional career with languages that do that stuff. So, so this is not the type of language I typically work with. So what I've just done here is I've set up the Rust language server, because dealing with the language is so much easier when you get the language server set up. And I'm trying the click through to definition. And luckily they have Dart style docs at the top of each member that you click through to. It makes it a lot easier for someone like me to skill up and get used to using it. So right now, the goal is to create the server, right? But I still don't know anything about this language. I've never taken a tutorial on it. Never really read any source before. And so what I'm doing here is I'm going to learn X and Y minutes. And I'm again just kind of getting a basic sense of how this stuff is set up. Okay. So right now I'm just trying to declare a variable. You know, we're seeing here that I'm declaring an integer, and I'm trying to print it out. And I'm just figuring out now how to do string interpolation. So those double curly brackets appear to be, you know, where Rust will insert arguments from print line, and it's working. So we've got the one coming through. And what we're doing here now is we're testing out mutable declarations. So now we've got Y, which is mutable, and we are, you know, printing that out as well. What's interesting is it's giving us an error. Not an error, but a warning. Okay. Okay. All right. That's okay. That's awesome. I love that. All right. Oh, it's so ridiculous. Okay. So. Oh my God, this is amazing. Whoa. But it's right down there though. What am I missing? Oh my God. Okay, hang on a second. Whoa, 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 whoa. That's hardcore. Oh, okay. Okay, let's see here. All right. Okay, so at this point, what I figured out is that the Rust compiler in the language server is extremely good at figuring out if something's been used or figuring out if something has been assigned and not read. And I've never seen this in the language before. Like that. So, and now we're trying to figure out why we can't print out that array of integers into the string. So I'm trying to figure it out. And this is about the time where I started to realize that there's the debug. I would call it an interface, typically. Maybe in this case, it's a, what is it called? No. Trait. I think it's called the debug trait. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, how do we go ahead and print this thing out? And now I'm hoping that we can use string from iterable to go ahead and pull it out. But again, I'm not familiar with the syntax of Rust at all, so I'm just kind of doing my best here. And even now, I can't tell you, I have a hard time reading the types. In the Rust language server tooltips. But interestingly enough, I have a Git extension that seems to be interfering with what's coming through there. Which doesn't happen to me in other languages, so I don't know if it's specific to I don't know if it's an issue with the language server VSCode integration or what the deal is.
So print array array to Rust.
Right. How to print structs and arrays. Okay, this is where I'm figuring out. I'm learning about the debug trait. For people new to Rust like me, a trait is essentially a interface. Actually, it is an interface.
So this language is pretty bare bones, close to the metal is what I'm gathering. What is this?
Okay. So I don't know this for sure, but I think that is like an opinionated language feature that reaches for the debug trait and gets some kind of string out of it.
So try this.
So now I'm trying to understand why, what is the difference?
Standard format.
Yeah, so it's an option that appears to pull something from the debug trait, or the debug trait implementation, if you will.
Okay. Rust trait.
And this is where I start to learn about traits. And this is when I realize I think that it's an interface.
Okay, so Rust trait versus interface. Yeah, right.
Traits are
interfaces, but they have implementation. No. Okay. Trait summary. Summary for user. Okay, so this is trait is an interface. Trait is an interface. And then you implement. Oh, that's so smart. You implement the interface like on a struct using what's basically an extension. Oh my god, this is so amazing. Oh my god. Oh. Okay. Can we do this real quick?
So here, what I'm doing is I'm realizing what this paradigm is. You create a struct, which is the data type or data class. I don't think there really are classes in Rust that I'm aware of. So you create your data type, and then you create an interface. Okay. In this case, the interface is called a trait. Right? It describes what a thing does, and it's essentially like a Swift protocol as well. And I'm not a big Swift developer, but it's my understanding. So I've created the person, it's got a name and an age, and I'm creating the trait, and I'm saying the reader, right? It's a common pattern for object-oriented programming. So now what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, I want to have a greet function that just prints something out, and I'm trying to return a void type. And I don't actually know what the void type is. So I'm trying to figure this out, but it's really not happy with me, and I don't have enough context yet to be able to read the docs clearly. So what I'm figuring out here is that the exclamation point is basically void, but it's not. And I couldn't tell you what the difference is right now because I never actually found the solution. So if you know, let me know. This is a type of language that I'm not familiar with. And so now we're going to go ahead and try to implement. And I'm excited about the fact that I don't have to name this implementation. You know, a lot of times an extension will have a name in other languages like Dart. But this, you just create the implement. You just implement it on person, and that's the end of it. So right now, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do print line, and it's not. And I'm realizing that there's a character literal and a string literal, which is unique to this language. So character literals are single quotes, and then string literals are double quotes. And I'm like, this is awesome. But I still can't get that void type to work out. So I'm trying to type the return value, but it's still not happy with me. But it's telling me that it found this bracket type, or like empty tuple. I'm not really sure. Okay. So I'm still fiddling around with it. So I fixed the print line. I had the wrong name, so it wasn't coming through correctly. And now we're going to try typing it with the.
How did that?
Friends, and it works. And at this point, you know, I could go try to figure out why it did what it did. And with more time, I would have. But really, I'm just trying to get to the solution. So I've got the types working out. Tyler's happy. And now I'm going to try to create a person. And I'm realizing now that I don't know what syntax I use. Like, is it curly braces? Are they comma separated? I'm just not sure. So finding an example, and I'm going to try to create one for me.
Age. I actually can't remember how old I am. I'm going to say 33.
And this is where I start to realize there's two string types in Rust.
He's a string literal? Hang on.
So a string literal doesn't create like a string type. It creates like some shorthand, like const string representation, which I'm guessing it has something to do with how low level this language is.
So where are we? Java. Probably like that. Rust.
And now I'm just reading through Stack to see if I can figure out what this is pretty quickly. And this is when I'm starting to realize that, you know, there's a string. I don't know if it's a struct. I would call it type.
Okay.
There's a string type, and there's a string.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So now we're doing string from that string literal type. And now we're going to try to print. Me.
Now, this does not implement. Yeah, okay. Doesn't implement debug.
It doesn't implement debug, so we can't do that.
Okay, let's get this printing out first. We'll do.
And I'm not interested in implementing debug. I understand what it is at this point. It's a trait.
Wait. Use dot access. Use double dot.
So I'm trying to figure out if we're using dot access or double colon access for this stuff.
No, that's not it.
And what I haven't realized yet is that the implementation, that greet implementation, because it doesn't have a reference to self,
how do you access?
It's on the struct. It's on the struct. It's not on an instance of the struct. And I haven't quite figured this out yet. So in Dart, we would say like static greet as opposed to like greet without the self reference. I think you might also be able to say without the self pointer. But again, these languages are not my expertise, and I haven't even really spent time trying to learn them. So just kind of working with things that I've heard in the past. And I will figure it out here in a second. I'm literally typing in how to call trait implemented function. What's interesting is that even though this Stack Overflow article doesn't solve the exact problem, it's still building context in my mind. I'm still like a sponge trying to like take up all this information and sort it out in my head as I'm going. And, I know that languages have these general things they do, and it's all like a bunch of black boxes, and I'm just kind of filling in little pieces of information here, and it's very fragmented. But we're getting closer to being able to like create a solution. So I've just realized that it's what I would consider static access of a method on a class. But in Rust, it would be on the struct, I believe. So what we're doing here is we're trying to print out just the name and the age from the struct instance and see if we can get that out. Okay, there it is. So we've got Luke and 33. And now I'm trying to figure out what
so this is on the class, not the class instance. So let's force it to be based on class instance. Hello,
So now this is interesting. So now what I'm doing is in that greet function, I'm trying to reference something from the instance. And I'm doing this because I'm trying to force the compiler and the language server to like give me some hints as to how to get there. And this is when I figure out you have to use a self-referencer pointer or whatever you want to call it. And I think having as the first argument is just a convention. Not entirely sure, but what I've done at this point is I've gotten to the point where I figured out how to implement.
Okay, cool. Wow, this is a lot of fun. All right, so we got some basics here. Can I get this into JSON? I'm just curious. Rust struct to JSON.
I figured out how to put methods on the struct and on the struct instance. So now I'm like stoked. I'm like, okay, we're starting to like fill in the major tools that I'm used to from an object-oriented programming. And right now, I'm just curious if I can.
Serde. How do we get serde in?
At this point, I'm just curious if I can get
code, dependencies.
I do a lot of mumbling. At this point,
so we're adding serde with the version and then the derived feature. Don't know where this is hosted, but we've got it there. And now, oh my God, why is that? That's insane. What the f?
So now I'm trying to set up serialization.
Serde.
I can't see my audio waveforms while I'm doing this, so I don't know if I'm
Good stuff.
myself or not. So I'm just gonna be quiet for a little bit. We'll fill in here in a second.
Okay.
So I'm trying to set up serialization on the struct because if it works for JSON serialization, because if it works nicely, then I'm going to be very
Where are we
happy.
here? Is this coming through, or are we having problems?
I can't reformat right now, so I'm assuming
That's
that there's
all
an
working.
error in the syntax. So I'm going to try to fix that. Reformatting is a great way to figure out if you've got valid code. So I
It
think I
looks like it's fine.
just found it. There we go.
Okay, there we go. Okay, all right.
Missing semicolon. So yeah, I'll be very happy if JSON serialization is easy in this language because it's something that I struggle with all the time in Dart. We don't have good serialization tools.
Whoops.
And there I am.
Dude, if this works, my mind's gonna be blown.
Well, spoiler, it's going to work, and my mind is going to be blown. Yeah, Dart
It looks like it's fetching all the dependencies, the full dependency graph for serde.
Dart doesn't have very good serialization.
Like on the edge of I see here. Oh my god.
And it comes through. Yeah, it works great.
That's unbelievable. That is absolutely unbelievable. Okay. Wow. All right, let's stand up a server. So we've done values, mutable values. We've done printing with a little bit of string interpolation. We've understood that string interpolation has some the colon question mark. Is accessing a debug trait, which is implemented to, I'm trying to figure out how to speak like someone, I'm trying to think on the fly of how you would say this correctly, which is implemented for our class. We have created a trait for methods on the class and
Struct.
methods on the instance of a class, or in this case, it's not a class, it's a struct, but just replace that, and I think I'll be close. And we have serialized that struct to JSON and printed that out. I'm just like stunned right now. Okay, this is awesome. All right, now we need to stand up a web server. So I'm going to go ahead and let's just commit this. So
we're about 33 minutes in,
basically.
and I've got the
Okay,
very
stand up.
absolute
Now,
basics
we need a Rust web server. So let's try that.
of the language figured out. And now we're going to try setting up a server. And then we found the Rocket framework.
I'm still having a hard time with the language features, so we're just gonna go for it.
So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to have
This
two entry
looks like
points.
it's pulling this in without going through cargo.toml, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so we're gonna run. We're gonna do serve. Cargo. Oh, that's going to main. All right.
And I'm finding out that I'm not going to be able to do that.
Is that a thing?
No, because it's going straight to me. So I'm like, all right,
Okay, that's all right.
we're not going to do this. We're just going to do it right. Else.
So I'm just going to replace this because we have it's wrong. Okay.
Now, here's a spoiler. For the next like 10 minutes, I'm going to struggle with just getting this example running because I don't understand the syntax around packages. They call people call them crates.
So I just do this.
And I'm just following the example blindly.
Rust package manager.
So here I'm realizing
Package registry. Thank you.
that there's a package registry called crates.io,
Get
and I'm getting Rocket.
this.
Look it in.
Hard time. It's a problem.
It's giving me an error, and I still don't understand exactly what's going on here. But I get the sense that it's trying to pull the Rocket framework from crates.io, or at least it's listed on crates.io, or it's indexed on crates.io. So it's trying to pull the Rocket framework from wherever it pulls it from. I don't know if it's Git, crates.io, or somewhere else. I have no idea at this point.
Still giving me a hard time over here.
And it looks like it's trying to compile it.
Build and run custom build command for Rocket.
And it's just giving me this error that I don't know anything about. So I'm searching it up, and what I'm going to find out here is that Rocket runs only on nightly. It doesn't run on the stable release of Rust.
What? To be on nightly? Okay. All right, we can do that. Why not? Rustup, install nightly.
So it's kind of weird to me that
Really
server
odd,
frame,
but we'll just go for it.
yeah, it's odd to me that
Why would they use nightly? For server framework, they want you on Rust's nightly release? Is it because the release is so stable that it's okay? Okay, let's try it.
So now I'm going to just start running into all kinds of errors that I just don't understand. And this part of the video is admittedly quite slow.
Still giving me a hard time. Could not compile type num. I don't know how much longer I can chase this around. Cargo, there must be another one. Cargo.
So now I'm just trying to run this thing just to see what happens. So I've got this error, but I don't know if it's in the language server or if it's an actual issue. So that happens a lot in Dart. The language server will give you something in the IDE that it says it's an error, and then you try to run it or you restart VS Code, and it works just fine. So here I'm a little skeptical of this being an actual error because it seems like you should be able to just be on nightly, put everything into cargo.yml, and then move forward. And my confidence is also low because I'm on nightly. Typically, you want to be on stable releases for anything you want to put in production, but there may be a reason why they don't do this for the
Yes, this is not going to work for me.
So I'm trying to back out at this point. I'm trying to back out of using Rocket. So I'm trying to get a list of all the tool chains that I'm on, or that I have available. And we've got stable and nightly. So I'm switching my default back to stable, and I'm going to go ahead.
Okay. I guess I can't use Rocket.
I actually end up using it, but I'm pretty sure at this point that this is not going to work for me. So what I do is I go and try to search for like a very basic web server. Now, because Rust is such a low-level server or a low-level language, I'm going to find out pretty quickly that I'm going to have to do a lot more work than I'm comfortable with the amount of time that I have.
Ooh. Okay. This is tough for me. I mean, I could sit down and deal with this, but this is tough. Well, maybe it's not so tough.
I'm going to try to convince myself that this will work, and then I realize very quickly that it's not going to work for the amount of time that I have.
Okay, I want something that's cool. This is super awesome, but I want some sort of. I know that that's what I wanted. Rocket is what I wanted, but I can't. Oof.
So we're going to try it again, because I know that the Rocket is going to give me what I need, but I can't seem to get the basic example running.
Rust Rocket server.
So now we're just looking for example of a server. Hello? That's feeling too complex, even though I know that everything that I need is in there. I just know it's going to take me a long time to go ahead and pull it out. And also, I'm seeing that the Rocket dependency is referenced to the repo, which makes perfect sense for if you pull down the repo and you want to use an example. But in my context, I want something where I can basically paste it in and see it running. And here we're getting rid of all the comments. I know that they're not contributing, but when you're not sure, you just want to delete everything that you don't need before you try to push forward. And now I'm trying to install a TOML formatter because I don't have one, and I'm really just annoyed with the fact that I can't format this. I don't understand why the most popular TOML extension would not have a formatter built into it. It doesn't make any sense. So I take a second here to try to install one. I like that one's called Even Better TOML because the other one's called, I think, Better TOML. So Even Better TOML actually has formatting. Yeah, actually has formatting. So maybe it is even better, even though it's less popular. So we're just going to refresh and get our ID working. So now we've got formatting. And we're happy about that. I'm also setting publish defaults because I know that in some languages that can change how the dependency system works. Not really change it, but they'll do certain things a little bit differently, and so I just want to set a defaults just to make sure.
It's not manager. What's it called? Registry.
So now we're trying to find Rocket again.
Rocket.
And there we've got an actual example that appears to be copy and pastable. So now we're just checking to make sure we're not missing anything glaring. Now we're doing cargo run.
Christ.
And I'm not sure exactly what changed here to fix this. My guess is that main.rs had some things in it that were not allowing it to compile with the way the dependencies were set up,
So why
with
is this-
nightly. I'm not sure. But in any case, we've got it working. And now we're trying to hit the endpoint because we can see the server running terminal, which is great. But I want to hit that hello name args endpoint just to see, make sure I understand what's going on.
So here.
There we go.
Boom. Great. Okay, awesome.
This is when we realized we're going to be able to make this happen. We've got about 15 minutes left,
Get
and now we're just writing into spec. So when you hit the root, you'll get the OK response. And I think at this point I've lost my audio because I tried to record that in QuickTime Player and it just did not work out at all. I actually had video of my face while I was doing this in QuickTime Player, just completely froze the frame and only recorded like 45 minutes of audio. So we'll be using OBS from here on out. That's what I'm using now. But in any case, we're almost done here, and what we're doing is we are going ahead and just making sure that we've got it working. You can see we've got the OK response coming from localhost. And now we're committing this because now this Rust project is to spec. So the next piece is I have to go ahead and get this on a Cloud Functions service. Now I've chosen to use Cloud Run. And I haven't, at this point I haven't touched Cloud Run or really any server code in months. And I don't even have Docker on my machine. So I literally just type brew install Docker. And now I'm looking for an example Rust Dockerfile. And I'm finding one that's actually like an example for Rocket. So I found it. I'm noticing immediately that this is exactly what I need. Creating the Dockerfile. I'm going to paste that in. And I'm just kind of looking it over. And now we're checking that we've got Docker on the command line, which we do, which is great. So now, let's see what am I doing now. Now I'm going to log into Google Cloud and actually set up a project. Because I don't have a project in Google Cloud ready to go or anything. So I'm just going through two-factor authentication and logging in. And then I'm going to go ahead and create my project. And now what I'm doing is I'm looking for an article I wrote in Medium a few years ago. And the reason I'm looking for this article is because in it there's a link to a repository, and that repository's README has all the steps for basically from beginning to end of setting up the Google Cloud CLI and getting it going. And the other thing too is I'm realizing now, I'm remembering that this has to be port 8080 in order for it to work with Google Cloud Run. So I'm setting the port to 8080, and I'm just trying to check to see if it needs a special endpoint, like a health check endpoint, because I can't remember if it does or not. And spoiler alert, it does not require a special endpoint. I think it just needs to have any kind of 200 response on root, like, or maybe another one on port 8080, or I think port 80. But I can't remember exactly. But I know that 8080 works, and I can see that the root should work. So I'm trying to install. I'm trying to install the gcloud CLI tool on Brew, but it's not available. And I'm realizing that Google wants you to like download a folder and unzip it, and then run the install tool, which I think is insanely archaic. I don't know why they wouldn't just put it on Brew. But this is the way they do it. And now I'm going to go ahead and unzip it and get it. So for time check, we've got 52 minutes left. Or we've got 52 minutes elapsed, and so that means we've got about 8 minutes left until the challenge is up. Now we're doing the installation of the Google Cloud CLI. And now we're going to try to log in, but it's not on path yet, so we got to open a new terminal. So we are authenticating. Again. And now we are setting the project in the CLI. Rust FaaS challenge. And now we're setting the region to US Central. And now we're going to submit a Docker build. Now at this point, I haven't actually run the Docker file because I can't remember how to do it. And I realized at this point that I've got 5 minutes left, and I'm just doing a Hail Mary, and I'm going to try to submit this thing. And I think everything looks right, but I'm not sure. So we're going to go ahead and open a fresh terminal, so we have gcloud on our path, and we're going to go ahead and submit this build. And this actually takes a while, so. At this point, I'm trying to figure out if the environment variable in the Docker file is going to be what I need to configure this. And I'm realizing that there's a rocket.toml file where you can do your setup. And I'm sure you can do it in code as well to some extent. Maybe not, but I'm noticing that environment variables do override everything, and that environment variable is set in the Docker file. And so I feel pretty confident that this is going to work at this point. And at this point in the video, I am basically saying, wow, this is taking forever. And the question is, we're right almost at the 1 hour mark, but I'm sitting here just waiting for this script to finish up, and I'm basically saying, boom, 1 hour. So this is the 1 hour mark, and I'm basically saying, listen, I'm sitting here waiting for this script. Does that count or does it not? If it works, then basically it was all right, but it wasn't deployed. So we're just getting this next command ready, waiting for Google to finish building this Docker container, whatever you want to call it, image container. I'm not really sure what it's building. I think it's the image. And I'm just sitting here like, oh my god, this has been like 6 minutes of just sitting here waiting for this thing. And I don't even know if it's going to run yet. So I've got that next command to actually deploy it, just sitting there waiting. Just waiting. Okay, so that's done. The image is done building. And we're going to go ahead and deploy this. And now I'm checking to see if I have Insomnia installed because I want to be able to hit the endpoint and see if it's sending back a 200. I could use curl, but if I'm being completely honest with you, I'm not too familiar with curl syntax. And so what I've decided is that once it becomes available, I'm just going to go ahead and use my browser. I'm trying to see if there's an Insomnia client in the browser, but all I'm finding is a Google Chrome app. So we've just decided that we're going to use the browser. If the browser returns the OK, then I'm going to feel pretty good. Okay, so now it's deployed. We're going to try going to it and see what happens. And it's working. We've got the OK response, and I'm assuming it's a 200, but there it is. So, man, the recap on this is crazy. It was recorded previously, in the webcam recording that didn't come through because of QuickTime. But basically what we've got is I opened my IDE, I installed Rust, I went and created a project, I went in and figured out how to do declarations, mutable declarations, figured out how to make a struct, figured out how to make it's not an interface, a trait, and then figured out how to implement the trait for the struct, which is an awesome pattern. The struct, trait, and implementation pattern is phenomenal. Swift has a similar one, and I think Kotlin does as well. But what we're doing at this point is, and then we went ahead and got JSON serialization working. We got Rocket, we switched between stable and nightly builds for Rust, and then we got Rocket running, and then we got our server put into a Dockerfile, and then we built that Docker image on Google Cloud, and then we went ahead and deployed that image on Google Run, and it works fine. And we're coming up on the 1 hour, 4 minute mark, and that's what we got. Thank you so much. Give it a try. See what you think.